Okay, well, I think we're live. I can see the number of participants sort of rising and rising. So I'll just let that do that for a few seconds and chatter on. But I'm here welcoming hundreds of people. This is going to take ages to this webinar, our post-election webinar, our post-election success webinar, which I'm very, very pleased to be asked to chair, actually, because we've got an absolutely amazing number of expert guests to speak to you. Now it's still increasing, so I'll just keep doing that for a little while. Can all the panelists be seen at the moment? I'm not sure how this is being directed. Do all the panelists want to wave to the people arriving? Thank you very much. That would be lovely. Bit of energy at the end of a very busy campaign. Everyone's looking very happy though. That's really good. Okay. It's slowed down a bit, the increase, so I think I might be able to start now and get on with it, because we've got a lot to cover in the next hour and 15 minutes, which is all we've got to talk about, an enormous amount of stuff. So yeah, good evening everyone, and goodness me, 500, that's more people than we normally get in conference. 556 people watching this, which is pretty good stuff. Thank you, Greens, for coming. We are going to do a bit of an expert deep dive into what happened in the local elections in England and Wales last week, and we'll get essentially just the Green perspective on this. So we're not going to be worrying about what happened to any other party. We're going to be talking about why we've done so well, and are we on track to get the kind of success that our strategy aims for. So yeah, we're not going to discuss any kind of gates today, although I would say I got re-elected in my own ward of Highgate, and I wish to only have that named as my scandal in the future. Now, we have a lot to talk about. We want to know what happened, why it happened, and very importantly, what is next, both at a local level around the country and in the next parliamentary elections. So to introduce myself and the guests properly, I'm Sian Berry. Many of you probably know who I am. I was co-leader of the party for a little while, but I've been a local councillor since 2014 in the ward of Highgate, which is just outside my window here in Camden. I was re-elected again on Thursday, and I think I'm about to break the world record for being the only councillor from the Greens on the council, which is, sadly I didn't win my new colleague, but lots and lots of you did. So we're here to talk about that. I'm also a London Assembly member, and so I spend a lot of my time scrutinising the Mayor of London. I've worked with Caroline Russell, also re-elected with new colleagues, and Zach Polanski, who many of you around London and the rest of the country will have had a visit from in the recent campaign. So we're going to have speakers' views from all the different guests that we have with us, but we are interested in your questions as well. There will be some slots for Q&As, so please use the Q&A function for this, not the chat function, very importantly. So please make sure that you use the code of conduct in the chat. This is a very celebratory event, but nevertheless, don't start arguing about statistics in the chat. Stick to the code of conduct. Now, I will introduce my panel now. So first of all, we have Councillor Zoe Nicholson, who is the leader currently of Lewes District Council, one of the most successful Green parties, and she's also been our local elections manager since the summer of last year, so she's going to bring us that perspective. We've got the incredible Chris Williams, who is our head of elections now and can really dig into what those results mean for us and what happened. And then we've got a very special guest, Carl Schoben, who is from Survation, the opinion polling company, one of the really big ones, who looks at public opinion, but also is very good at analysing political trends. And he will be helping us to look into what it is about the Greens that are making more and more people vote for us, as well as our immense amounts of door knocking. Then after that, we'll go on to what next for our own strategy. Zoe will take us through that, and also how we'll convert that to general election success. And for that, we've got Paul Steedman, who is now our constituencies manager, having come out of very successful constituency campaigns. But his job is to take us beyond Brighton, and he'll be telling us what Brighton Hove, sorry, and he will be telling us more about that. And then we will also have our incredibly brilliant co-leader, leader of, are you sorry Carla, I've lost your note from earlier, are you the leader of the group of Greens on Bristol as well?
No, I'm not. That's the
okay. Yes, you are a very successful councillor in Bristol, but also our target candidate for the Bristol West constituency. So Carla will be there to tell us and motivate us and congratulate you later on as well. But starting with, as promised, Zoe to tell us what happened, and also Chris to tell us a bit more about why, but we're starting with what. So Zoe, will you give us that rundown of how we did?
Thanks very much, Sian. It's very exciting to be here. And what's really lovely is to see the names of the people who stood in the elections come through from all those parties, all the 160 odd local authorities across the country that had elections. So, this is as much for you as it is for those people that didn't win. It's as much for you as those people that did. So it's lovely to see. It's lovely to see you all. So I'm going to do a few minutes of what happened. Let me just share my screen. Here we go. So what happened? How did we do? Well, the context for this is that we contested, well, there were 5,500 seats up for election, of which in England and Wales. So all of Wales was out for election, all local authorities, and we stood in about just over 40% of our seats. The results, as you know, you've seen them all over the news. We've been described as phenomenal. We've just been described as shifting the tectonic plates. We got fantastic results of a net gain of 78 councillors across 60 councils. 21 of those were breakthroughs into councils that we had never been in before. And in Wales, a very special mention to, I saw a fair few of the Wales team here, and congratulations to all of you who got yourself elected, and congratulations to the teams who fought so hard and didn't quite make it. But astonishing results in Wales, with breakthroughs onto 7 councils with 8 councillors. And critically, London elections were this year, so there haven't been London elections since 2018 in local authorities, and there we did some fantastic breakthroughs into new councils, including Croydon, Tower Hamlets, Hackney, and one other that I've forgotten, with now which one was it? Newham, that's it. Oh yeah, astonishing results in Newham. Broke into red wall territory where it's a one-party state in Newham. It is no longer a one-party state in Newham because it has Danny Keeling and Nate Higgins as councillors. And just to mention Scotland, because our sister Green Party in Scotland did fantastically well. 19 became 35 pretty much overnight. So, and our graph, looks a bit like this. So some of you will have seen this before, but what we've been doing over the last 6 to 8 years in particular has been really investing in winning elections, and that we are now at 546 or 47, depending on who you speak to on any given day, hoping to, we breached the 500 mark, hoping to get to 550. We imagine very shortly, given a number of defections and possible by-elections. There's always an election going on somewhere around the country. One of the things that you can see from the map of where we were winning and where we won across England, Wales and Scotland, but particularly across England. And I love that, I'll come back to Wales in a minute, but you can see that this is stolen from the BBC, by the way, that we are winning in everywhere. So we right the way across the country. Of the 160, 100 odd, I think it's 160 councils that were up. We won seats in 60 of them in England and Wales. And I love this Welsh, look at that lovely Welsh, north to south, band is absolutely fantastic. And we're growing in impact. So, we have got more and more growing number of places where we're in the balance of power. Some of us have been in detailed conversations with those people who are in the balance of power, who may be forming alliances to take control or not, as the case may be, over the next few days and weeks. And then, we are now on 167 councils. That's, as I said, a net gain of 21, where we've never been in before. And increasingly, we are becoming the official opposition, now 15 councils, and which is plus, where it was 10, it's +5. So that's the kind of sum of where we are. And Chris is going to do the how come we got to that point.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So yeah, I think it's pretty special what's happened there. Especially that graph just showing us going up and up and up. There's been many similar graphs made. Hockey stick curve, if you put it as a line, which is pretty impressive. Job now is to keep it going. But why have we done well? If you've been an activist out on the ground, it's not actually massively surprising. If we were to ask folks in the chat box, I think most of you would say it's the work, it's the shoe leather, it's the hard work. And this tweet from Calderdale, where a Green gained from a Tory by just 7 votes, I think sums it up. Here's somebody who was just torn on who to vote for, a knock on the door, that's what did it. And that really is what pulls out so many of the votes. The correlation between where we've campaigned really astutely, with the right campaign tactics, not cutting corners, but doing, pulling out all the stops, that's where we've won. There's very strong correlation there. Yes, some have it a bit easier, some have it a bit harder, some work really hard and don't quite make it, have a great increase in their vote, and the success comes next time. But it is those campaigns that were out, pretty much 6 days a week, 6-7 days a week for 6 weeks, knocking on the doors, and the year-round campaign well before the election was on anybody's radar. They're the ones that won, those that essentially were organised and disciplined. It's that organisation that is just so key. But obviously, there isn't just some sort of random arrival of lots of Greens all over the country suddenly deciding to work really hard. The party itself has been increasingly organised in the past few years. We've got a great staff team, which is there, we call a field team, in order to help build that broader, effective, electorally literate campaign team on the ground. To production of the resources like the campaign manual, our online resources like the templates. We have our internal comms in the party and external media coverage really bigging up what Green councils achieve. What's the point of electing a Green? This is what they do. So we're getting that message out there that Greens deliver, Greens are credible. The growth in our resources, all those donations that we ask for, enables all of that to happen. And all of that together, very crucially, has resulted in a culture change in the party. Just a handful of years ago, the vast majority of local parties just didn't really believe that they could win in their area. And the vast majority didn't feel motivated to give up those hundreds of hours that it requires in order to win. So, our members focus on other things. That has changed significantly. And so we did some sums on this, but I think it's now the vast majority of councils up for election this year had a target campaign. I would say there is now a winning mentality in the party. But so most of it is very much in our control, but the political wins, they very much do have an impact as well. So as much as we're rowing across the lake, we also need to turn the sail in order to benefit from those wins too. So this year, the winds were blowing in our favour in some ways, not in other ways. There's lots of regional variation, but this lovely graphic from New Statesman, Britain Elects, Ben Walker, just really does sum up, this is England only on this particular slide, shows that huge reduction in the Tory level of support. This is the general election, change in general election opinion polls across 4 years on the right-hand side there. Big shift in the Tory vote, not so much for Labour, pretty much the same across all of England. What has Keir Starmer been doing? But alas, if we look at, if I put on what happened to the Greens over that time, well, actually, our national polls, we've doubled in that time on the right-hand side. General election, local elections, they're not the same thing, of course. But if that is the starting point, if that is the background shift, already we have a little bit of an advantage there. And that doesn't mean there's interestingly sized bars on the left and right there in terms of poll change and number of seats. But we've had swings of 10, 20, 30, 40% increases in the vote in some of those target wards. 2.8% isn't enough to win very many extra seats. It's the hard work, aided a little bit by the political wins. And in some places, like in London, the political wins are a little bit different. Again, this is just average across all of England. Next slide. So yeah, so Opinion did something very interesting. I think this is just an important graphic that I wanted to pop on the screen. I'm looking at Tory defectors, and it's a very small sample. Carl would no doubt tell me, yeah, just over 300 people, admittedly. But on Thursday last week, they did a sample of Tory voters who had switched, Tory defectors, and what were their main reasons. And it's overwhelmingly cost of living and health. Were the reasons. I'm sure Partygate is a factor too. So that's just a useful takeaway for us to be aware of. So in summary, yes, there was a big reduction in the Tory vote. So where we're up against the Tories, that was very helpful. Where we're up against Labour, we had a small average benefit over them in terms of shift compared to 4 years ago when the English seats were last fought. That wasn't, there was some regional variation there, but not a massively surprising conclusion as ever. And it is worth a reminder, if we want to win more seats, it's our work on the ground that's going to make it happen.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris and Zoe. I'm going to move on to Carl in a second, but I've been watching the Q&A and there's a couple of really brief factual questions that I thought I might put to you just to to clarify on your slides. One question was, what's the balance of who we beat? Chris, Zoe, you can probably tell us that. I know the answer, but do you want to quickly tell us?
Well, actually, we took seats pretty much evenly from Conservatives and Labour. We took 2 seats from Liberal Democrats. Those people that know me would know how much I enjoy taking a Liberal Democrat seat. But evenly. What's interesting, though, from my perspective going forward, is that actually, although we took seats evenly, we didn't target evenly. So it's actually, our targets were more predominantly towards the Labour seats. And that's partly to do with the way that the elections happened. There were a lot of metropolitan elections this time round. But it's also, I think, part of our kind of decision making about, and part of our capability as a party about where are we fighting seats. So I think there's some interesting discussions to be had about that. But what we demonstrate is that where we can take seats off of anybody, and Caroline's argument that she put in the Independent, I think it was yesterday, is absolutely right. We win seats everywhere and from everybody when we put our mind to it, that we attract all sorts of different types of voters.
Thanks, Zoe. I'm trying to keep to time. So the next factual question I would like the shortest possible answer to. Do we yet know the gender balance and the gender distribution of and the other demographics of our successful candidates? We might not yet, but do you have any inkling so far?
Yeah, I actually looked at this yesterday and I was nearly going to do a slide on it, but us and the Scottish Greens come up top as being over 50-50 on our proportionality between men and women. We're the top scorers right the way across the country.
But that was for candidates, I think. The question.
Oh, sorry, what did you say? Winning?
the successful candidate.
Ah,
We
okay.
might not
Haven't
know
done that.
yet.
No, I've
Yeah,
seen
yeah.
candidates felt important to me, because if you look down the bottom, only 25% of Conservative candidates were women. And even and Labour weren't achieving much more.
Yeah, and then the question from Nate in Newham, Councillor Nate, again from Newham. Did your comment on the increase, because great to see +5 official opposition, was that including Newham, who were not quite yet recognised as that? Yeah, you're counting it as they will get recognised. Great. Okay, so moving now to Carl, who will, I mean, you've heard Zoe and Chris's analysis. We first of all want to know, do you agree with that? and also, what's your analysis of what led to our continuing, hockey stick chart?
I mean, I'm not part of your party. I'm an independent.
No, exactly.
So I can't comment on the ground operation and the campaign aspect, but I mean, clearly that would have a very important aspect. So yes, I agree on that level. Just as an aside to the previous question from the audience about the gender balance, what I can tell you is from research that we have done about who the most likely voters are for particular political parties, there is quite a significant likelihood factor that Green voters are more likely to be women than men. So, in terms of how you manage your candidates and so forth, I think that's an important factor to register. Factually, you've gone through what happened, and so I'm just going to make some comments on that. And I'd like to make some sort of broader analysis on who I think your voters are and who your sort of most likely voters are, to help you inform how you campaign in the future. And I think what we saw with last week's elections kind of illustrated some of this, I think. So, I mean, at Survation, we're a pollster and we do a lot of work on what motivates people to vote in the way we do, and helping political parties and campaigns understand how to shape opinion, how to shape campaigns, and how to know who it is they're targeting. So, I specialize in audience targeting. What I'd say very, very broadly about what the results mean in terms of kind of the political scene is the Green gains in the Midlands and the North are on average higher than those in London and the South. So that is dispelling one immediate kind of conventional myth about the Green Party. You could say you made good inroads into the red wall, okay, which is something you should be very pleased with. And given that Labour and the Lib Dems all made gains and are closer competitors to the Green Party, it's unsurprising that the Green improvement is negatively correlated with Labour and Liberal gains. So I think what I'm trying to say is that what I think we saw last week was less Labour, Lib Dems and the Green Party competing against each other for votes. I mean, clearly you did in individual councils, but the broader shift was the Conservative losses. So Conservative losses happened where there were either Green, Labour or Lib Dem gains. So the momentum was centre-left gains versus negative Conservative losses. So I think it's clear this shows the Green benefiting from what we could call a centre-left pivot, which happened last week, rather than being squeezed by Labour or the Lib Dems. All right, and all the factors we'd expect. You saw some of it in the poll from Opinium. I mean, what you saw was issues. So the cost of living was clearly a massive issue in the local elections. And what the graph wasn't showing was the massive negative impact of Boris Johnson, Conservatives, and although we weren't going to mention Gates, there's clearly a lot of Gateism knocking around in the local elections last week, which I think all contributed to this centre-left pivot, and and not excellent campaigning that Chris mentioned aside, it contributed to the Greens' successes last week. But I think for the Greens, I think it's key to understand how it can compete better on this centre-left field, because it's crowded. And from our research, we believe there are essentially two groups of credible target Green voters, which broadly come from a social, economic and political left background. But within this left and centre-left voter groups, it's important to understand the differences in who from them are more likely to vote Green. And I think we saw this. We haven't done precise analysis and correlation of the votes last week to know this for sure, but I think we can see from the trends that this is where we're going. So within the centre-left spectrum of voters, we call it a segment, we call it a cohort, you effectively have what you might call the harder left, or the kind of people more firmly who identify as left-wing and are very politically motivated. We all know these people. We probably are these people in reality, in many respects. Now that is quite a small group, and they very, very neatly align with Green Party policies, Green Party, Green Party objectives and Green Party values. So this is the group on the sort of firmer left, identify as left and are very politically engaged. Now, the problem with this group in terms of voting Green is they are so politically motivated, they are far more likely than other parts of the left to actually vote Green, because their motivation is primarily to get rid of the Conservatives. So this group is very susceptible to the two-party squeeze that happens at general elections in particular. So, I mean, I think my message to you, and it's really important, is that the people who you might think are most likely to vote Green are not actually likely to vote Green, because they're more likely to vote Labour come election time. So even though they feel like they're Green supporters and they sound like Green supporters, they criticise Keir Starmer from the left, they're very disillusioned with Labour, they are still very highly likely to vote Labour. So I think what I would focus on more from the Green perspective in terms of target voters is that what we would call a centre-left faction, a centre-left cohort of voters who are less politically engaged. Okay, they don't identify necessarily as left-wing, but they do have what we would recognise as left-wing attitudes on the economy. They're socially liberal. They're more likely to have been Remain voters, but they tend not to vote, or they veer towards Labour, but they vote for all parties. Okay, and the reason this group is more likely than others to vote Green is because they're disillusioned with the two-party system. And something very interesting we found in our research is they're less susceptible to the two-party squeeze. So they are the type of voters that used to vote Liberal Democrat, perhaps. They tend not to live in the big cities so much. They tend to live in towns. We think they're more predominantly located in the south of England, but the fact that you did very well or better in the North and Midlands suggests that they're more spread out. And when we've asked this group of voters in the past what would motivate them to vote for the Green Party, they talk about the environment a lot. So they're very motivated by your environment policies. And they're slightly less motivated, as I said, by the can they win here. So we're not going to vote for them because they can't win. They might vote Green regardless as a vote because they're disillusioned with the two main parties. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to go on for too long, but
I bet you've created so many questions in my mind already there. I bet the audience are just going to be asking so many things about it.
I think for many this might be a slightly uncomfortable message, but
Really interesting.
I, as all political parties should advise their sort of activists and campaign teams not to spend too much time on Twitter, but that there's a lot of sort of Labour left, disillusioned Labour people who might have been very supportive of Jeremy Corbyn that are saying, "Oh, I'm not going to vote Labour, I'm going to vote Green." And what I would advise is to take this with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because the sort of people who are very inspired by Jeremy Corbyn and who are very politically motivated, they hate the Conservatives with a passion. And when it comes to elections, will probably vote Labour. They will find that they like their local candidate, that who they might not like the leaders, but they like their local candidate. So they will more than likely not vote Labour. And just kind of to reiterate, it's the people you hear less from, the less engaged, the people that are disillusioned. They are anti-establishment and they're anti-system, and they veer towards the left. But
Can I ask you a question?
Their identity. It's not their identity, and I think that is where the Green votes are coming from. Just one more is maybe the Lib Dem. Maybe it's sort of capturing that high Lib Dem vote that they got 20 years ago when Charles Kennedy was leader.
This is my question, really. Can I ask my question?
Those
Sorry,
voters are still there.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, go on.
I can. Yeah, so this, I think you're getting towards the question that I've got, really. So I think what you're saying is that the Labour left people, the active Labour left people, may vote for us, but they think for themselves. They're more like the weather. We might get them or we might not. But in terms of our actions and the people who are persuadable by talking to them and winning them and getting them right over to us. Sorry. In terms of getting the target to win activities that we do, the persuadable people, they are more the floating centre left who are not really committed to politics, but they are interested in the world and voting. I think that metaphor is really, really useful. But my question is, are those people also potentially a bit flaky if there's a resurgence of some kind of Clegg mania? Because we saw what happened before.
I think not, because if you study the political attitudes of this particular group of voters who we think might vote Green, and more likely to, they have strong left of centre views on the economy. So they favour redistribution, they favour public ownership, and they are strongly in favour of investment in public services. Now, it is true that because they are not that politically engaged, they might see a Clegg type figure and say, "Oh, that sounds good," So it would be the job of the Greens that are in a way floating in that same pool of disillusioned voters. It's for the Lib Dems to show their distinction from that sort of Clegg sort of, we know what Nick Clegg is and was. So it's to make that broad, it's to make that distinction, and that's why this might not be popular, but it's in a way it might be capturing that old Liberal Democrat Charles Kennedy left of Labour on social, I mean, actually Charles Kennedy was left of Labour on almost everything, I seem to remember at the time in the 1990s. So that, I think, might, is a really rich source of future Green Party votes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to stop there because there are many questions that need to be covered in the -2 minutes we've got left for this part of the section. Am I all right to carry on and slightly, Chris, and ask a few of the questions? They're largely for you and Zoe, I think, and getting there's a few themes. I'm going to try and merge things together a little bit. Now, quite a lot of people have been asking about trends in the results effectively, and I know there was that map that showed the distribution of our results, and you can look at that and you go, I cannot spot any trends. And I'm very pleased that London and also Wales, we're no longer the problem children of the Green Party of England and Wales. We're contributing to that map as well. But have you done any work? Someone wants to know about the success rate, and I imagine that varies a lot between different types of contests. People have been asking about, how do you get the extra councillors once you've got 1 or 2? What's the expansion strategy? And people have also asked about, the fact that a lot of people who defected from other parties to the Greens didn't win back their seats, and we know that's quite common. So have you got any analysis, Chris or Zoe, of which are the more likely things to succeed, and are you going to be bringing forwards any new strategies to help the harder things to do, like expanding beyond 2 or 3? What's target to win 3.0, and when are we receiving it, please? Thank you.
Just checking whether Zoe wanted that, or there's loads of questions. I mean,
I've merged about 6 questions into one there.
Loads there, so I'll probably only do half anyway. But yeah, trends. Yeah, I saw the question about geographic. Some of the questions in the Q&A box are coming up next. I know Paul and Carla and Carl will come to, but yes, there was that lovely map on the Green Party's Twitter account today of. It just looks like we gained all over the place. They listed all the new councils where there were Greens for the first time, but there was more than half the council seats up for election in England and Wales this year were in London and Wales. Just those two alone accounted for most of it, like far and away the majority. So some regions hardly had any elections at all. Yet despite that, there were breakthroughs all over the place. This year you could say it was a little bit easier to win in some of the rural, smaller district seats that were Tory facing because of the winds blowing the way they were. This year was largely an election of urban seats, a lot of urban areas, not exclusively. Wales is different, but in England very much so. If we had next year's set of elections this year, we would have made an even bigger breakthrough. So it wasn't a geographical trend. The biggest correlation, the biggest trend is how much work you do and how early you started your campaign and winning. You can win in almost any place, how early you start. So if you want to win next year, you need to be at it right now, not talking about it for a few months starting in October. That'll be too long. And most campaigns say, wish we'd started earlier, we would have closed the gap by that final 100. We do have a lot of defectors. We've had a lot of defecting councillors in the past year, and some of them know they're not going to get the seat back, so they haven't tried to get the seat back. It's a point of principle. Some of them wanted to retire anyway, and so those were accounted for quite a lot of the handful of losses that we had. And some tried to, but they get their seat back, but only joined in the past few months. And again, the campaign just didn't start early enough. But there are defectors who get their seats back, absolutely. Especially if they're joining well ahead of the election. Moving beyond that first seat, I'll stop on this one. It's a bit like a game of Risk. If you haven't played Risk for 20 years like me, you've only got so many little plastic pieces. But in order to keep taking over the world, sometimes it feels like we're trying to. Then you need to keep pushing those plastic pieces and actually doing a bit less in some other places. But you've got to keep on building up your campaign team, asking people to get involved, speaking to your strong Green voters, your poster displayers to help deliver those leaflets. Just keep building, asking people to join the party. If we all asked one person to join the party or one supporter to help out, we would be, doubling our capacity overnight, and that would be quite incredible. Speaking of which, probably share the join link. But anything missing, Zoe, or should we move on?
No, that also covers one of the questions I was going to ask, which is, essentially how, what are the next steps for local parties in growing their capacity to fight the next election, and how do we turn, you know, the big number of supporters we now have in our local areas into more members who will be candidates next time. I'm assuming the field team will be giving us guidance on activities and things that we might do for that.
Sure. I mean, one of the key things for those of you that have had elections this time round is to, you know, nip round all those people who said that they would vote Green, and with a bundle of newsletters, a bundle of thank you newsletters, and ask them to deliver for you. I was campaigning in various different places over the country, and in particular in Hastings on polling day. And I remember going around a place thinking, this lady here who I've just had a conversation with, somebody needs to go back and ask her to help. You know, we need to stop being so shy about asking people to help when we've won, and, you know, do what Norwich, you know, I'm taking this out of Norwich's book of go round and make sure that after the election you can meet all those people who said they would vote for you, and get them to help you build the profile of your councillors and support you into the next election.
Excellent. So I've saved up some questions that relate more to national issues for the next section, national as in MPs and Parliament for the next section. So we're moving on now to what next, basically. So Zoe, we've got another set, we hope before the next election, we've got another set of local elections to come. So do you want to very briefly tell us what you know, how important those local elections are, and why you want us to start?
Yes. So just to place some context, so this year there were 160 odd local authorities who had local elections. In 2023 it's 241, and partly because it's a lot of district and borough councils, you know, second tier councils all over the country have got those elections. The reason why it's so significant for us is because we have approximately 250 defence seats. So all of those people that got elected, including myself in 2019, are up for re-election. And I think Doug made a question in the chat about targets and enough to meet our overall political strategy aims. And in total at the moment, we have, you know, those defence seats of 250, but we also have another 250 plus target seats already identified. So in theory, if every one of those comes through, then, you know, we're holding 250 and you know, going after another 250, then, you know, we might do well. However, you know, we know that our success rate on target seats, you know, just like anywhere, is dependent on the amount of time, energy and commitment that, you know, all of you put into making it work. So it's a very, very big ask for 2023. And then after that, 2024 and 2025, there's 110 local authorities have elections in 2024, and 2025 it's a much smaller number. There are only 31 councils have elections in 2025. So 2023 is a massively big year for us as the party. We've probably not faced that level of election excitement for a very, very long time.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Zoe. Now, I need to apologise to somebody who asked just a question that said, let him finish earlier on. I did interrupt Carl, but partly because we do have a further now section for Carl to talk to us about the political space that we could potentially occupy. So we were asking about, you know, practicalities and voter groups, but we are trying to find out a bit more about, you know, what's the political space, what's the gap in the market, to use a commercial metaphor, for the Green Party at the next general election. And I know you've sort of talked about that already. So if you can maybe tell us more about the kinds of places where those people congregate, and also a few questions have come up in the Q&A, particularly asking you to talk more about age. And I think age is really interesting, partly because potentially we might get votes at 16 through, because it's starting to prove successful in parts of the UK, and what you know about younger people and voting and turnout and things like that. If you've got any further bits like that to add, that would be really useful.
Okay. I mean, on the age, I was just responding to a question. I don't know if I did it right about age, and you know, the answer, I don't know the ages of people that voted Green last week. I haven't got that data, but that would be incredibly useful. I mean, I think one of the, so you would, and I would think that the prime Green voter is young, so is, you know, young, idealistic, really worried about climate change. That, you know, that is graduate probably. I mean, and I go back to the issue. So there are fewer of those voters. They're less likely to vote. And as I said in my talk earlier, they are also the ones most likely to care so much about getting rid of Conservatives and the hated Boris Johnson that they will vote Labour on the squeeze routine. Okay, so I mean, in research that we have done on voting clusters, I mean, that's what we do all the time. The most likely Green voters tended to be kind of 30 plus to about 50. So older than you would expect. And I would expect, especially given that people that vote in council elections are older, that fits who voted Greens possibly for the first time, or, you know, last week. So that is, you know, that is where I would see the bulk of Green voters coming from. You get much, you know, you start to get older and they're more likely to be Conservatives. In terms of a gap in the market, there was another question I saw about, which characterised that I was talking about a sort of centre-left floating. Centrist was used. I wouldn't use the word centrist. I would use the word slightly floating, and I think that's right. That's where the Greens should be targeting. And the question was: is there a similar centre-right cluster of floating voters that the Greens should be targeting? And I would say no. I think people with traditional right-wing attitudes are not tempted to vote Green. They would be more likely to vote Lib Dem or Conservatives, or not vote, or possibly even Labour. So I don't think there is a big thing for the Greens. In terms of a gap in the market, I mean, there definitely is a gap in disillusioned Labour voters that are, you know, that they don't like Labour's pull to the centre, if you like. But I think it's wider than that. It's not really about left, right in those terms. What you have with Labour is not so much a centrist pull, but you have them being incredibly safe and sort of, you know, we've returned to kind of 2002, 2014, 2015 era of not being able to listen to Labour politicians anymore on the telly and the media, because their sole aim is to get through an interview without saying anything. That will start, that sort of thing puts people that would vote Green off. It's politicians that they think are not saying anything, that they're all the same, they're all saying the same things. So I think that is a gap in the market, regardless really of Labour's left-right position. It's the fact that the Greens are prepared to stand up and say stuff. So I think that's a really important gap in the market. The research we've done showed that actually climate change and the environment is a massive driver of votes to the Green Party. So you know, I know that I'm sure there's been an intractable internal debate within the Green Party forever about how green how much emphasis there should be on green policies as opposed to other policies. And actually, we found that the environment is a massive driver of votes to the Green Party. So you have the branding, you have the popular policy, so that should be exploited, and the issue is growing in importance to people all the time. And then you have the cost of living that will get worse, and it will increase as the two main parties increasingly come up with solutions that don't feel enough for people. They will become more disenchanted with the two parties and they will see a gap. But that's where you will need to compete with the Lib Dems, who will probably not be offering much on the cost of living. So I think the cost of living is a massive potential driver of votes for the Greens. Is that okay? Does that answer the question?
That's really interesting because, yeah, we are a party of redistribution, and that would obviously help with that. So, and potentially the others are not. Yeah. On the age, though, people are speculating in the questions about whether or not the reduction of the voting age in Wales helped us. And obviously, you don't know, like you said, you don't know who voted Green. But in general, are you seeing any kind of changes in the overall picture from the extension of the franchise downwards?
I mean, to be honest, I don't know much about Wales. So I can't. I mean, I'm guessing that. I mean, for that, it's not going to happen in England before the next general election. I think more generally reducing the. I mean, I think it will help Labour more, that reducing the. So that's probably, it will help the Greens. The Greens will pick up votes from 16-year-olds being able to vote, but Labour will probably pick up more. So I'm not sure if there would be a net gain in votes for the Greens, but obviously you should support and encourage it because you think it's the right thing to do. And young people interested and engaged in politics is a good thing generally.
Excellent. That's a very expert and analytical answer. That's really excellent. Brilliant. Okay, so now on to winning MPs, which is a lot of what the questions have been about. What do we do next to win MPs? This is why Paul is here. So Paul Steedman, our co-constituencies manager, tell us what you think.
Absolutely. Great to be here. And just by way of background, people are asking, can we really win MPs? And I would say definitively from experience, yes. So I was Caroline Lucas's campaign director in 2009-10. We did win, we can win again, we will do so. So I'm just going to share a few thoughts then on the general election. Just to remind you, when the general election is going to be, we don't know. It is definitely going to be by May 2024 at the very latest, but it could be any time before then. It feels quite unlikely that it will be now, what with the cost of living crisis and the results for the Conservatives last week. But it's not impossible. Things could happen. So we kind of do need to be ready for that possibility. Things are very unpredictable in politics at the moment. And if it happens before next summer, so summer 2023, it will be on the existing constituency boundaries that we're all familiar with. If it's in autumn next year or later, it's likely to be on new boundaries. So the Boundary Commission is looking at new boundaries at the moment. We will see in some places that is potentially a significant benefit to us. What we're trying to do at the general election, there are two big things. We want to achieve as big a national vote share as we can, not just for its own sake, but because that enhances our credibility. It increases the number of people who get in the habit of voting for us and means we're going to win more local election seats and more general election seats. It increases the amount of money that's available to the MPs that we do elect. And overall, it just it increases our position in the political debate. But to be honest, I would give up winning all the national vote share that you like if we were to win more MPs, and that's my primary focus in my work, is winning more MPs. So what does last week tell us about general election strategy? As we've heard, we've been taking votes from Labour and the Conservatives and the Lib Dems right across England and Wales. And so in many respects, the lesson is that we need to be standing at the general election everywhere. That will help us with that first aim, which is maximising vote share. And the focus for that maximising vote share, when we're standing everywhere and giving everyone the opportunity to vote Green, the thing that we'll be doing to get people voting Green in as many places as possible is that the Party of England and Wales will be running a strong national communications campaign targeted precisely at the voters Carl's just been describing, who are most open to us. And so we want people to be standing everywhere, but in almost every seat, we don't want people to be planning a really elaborate, extensive general election campaign. Kind of want people to be focusing on winning those council seats and building up the number of council seats. And that's for one reason, which is that the other big lesson that we take, I think, from last week is that we achieved amazing results by focusing our resources. You know, we've really heard about the impact of the ground campaign on those results. We put the people, we put the money in the places where we can do best, and we call that target to win. And so the approach for the general election is no different. We will be particularly focused on a handful of constituencies where we think we can do best. And we'd really, really love people to use, if you're kind of mentally dividing up your time between your local election work and your general election work, generally use your general election time, energy, money to support all our work in one of those priority constituencies where we're going to be running really intensive ground campaigns to cut through all of the national chit chat on the media, in the media and on social media, and getting to speak to people face to face, because that's what we know makes the difference. And to give you a sense of where we're talking, here are a few of the places that we're particularly focusing. So we have two big priority targets. Obviously, Caroline Lucas in Brighton Pavilion. Want to kind of make sure that Caroline continues to enjoy lots of electoral success. And we also want to make sure that co-leader Carla Denyer, you'll be hearing from her in a second, joins Caroline on the green benches. And we have lots of reasons, I think, to feel positive about our chances of doing that in Bristol West. But we're developing a pipeline of other places where we're really looking for excellent results next time round, second place or better. And there are a number of seats, there they are, all across the country in England. And we've got excellent candidates with lots of experience ready to do really, really well in those seats. So why do I feel so optimistic? It's not just on the basis of our fantastic local election results last week, but it is an important part of it. So our local election results show people that if you vote Green, you get Green, and in the right places, even under first past the post. So there's been a lot of discussion in the chat about PR, and that would be great. But even under first past the post, in many places, a Green vote is not a wasted vote. If you vote Green in the right places, you get Greens. And that enhances the credibility of the idea that we can win more Green MPs. People believe it, they see it. Our local election results also have had a really transformative impact on how we're perceived in the national political conversation. I hope you'll have seen that we've become way more regular in, that top line, the second line of TV bulletins, newspaper columns, were being talked about in the same breath as Labour and the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. Again, that enhances our credibility, makes it more plausible that we're going to win more MPs. And we're polling well nationally. Chris shared some of those figures about our polling improvements earlier. Caroline Lucas's record and the fact that there are Greens in government within the UK and in countries around the world, people can see that Greens, Greens in government deliver stuff, and that enhances credibility for us too. I have to say, we are also in an incredibly in a position where we're more focused on this than we have been in a very, very long time. The party's really got its act together and the bit between its teeth in terms of winning more MPs, more so than it ever has been in the last decade. And it's using the lessons from Caroline's win in Brighton Pavilion, even to the extent of getting some of the old band back together. So, myself, Adrian Ramsey as co-leader, there are lots of us who were around then, and we're back to fight the good fight. We're planning on investing earlier. One of the key things from Brighton Pavilion was you cannot leave it till the last minute. You've got to do it years out. And we've got new staff on the ground already. We have invested in training for candidates and campaign managers in those priority constituencies. We're undertaking the research that Carl was describing to understand our voters better and meet their needs. And compared with 2010, we've got way more people, both members, supporters, staff, and money, and all of that will really, really help. I think it's safe to say that we've got a unique offer to voters. We've got distinctive things to say that the other parties are not saying that they need to say on the big issues that matter. So, we highlighted earlier, cost of living, energy, housing, health. These are all things that we have unique things to say that other parties are not saying. And the context matters a lot. One of the other things that we can draw from last week is that Boris Johnson and the Conservatives are really struggling to connect with many voters, but Keir Starmer's Labour Party are not setting the world alight. There is not the excitement there that makes you feel like, oh, Labour are on a charge and they're a dead cert for the win. So in that context where people are just a bit annoyed about both of the biggest two parties, that creates a really fantastic opportunity for us. And, if we want concrete evidence, the Liberal Democrats in the North Shropshire by-election recently, the Owen Paterson by-election, where the Conservatives had a huge majority at the start, that shows how a third party that's not either red or blue can outperform the big two to win in the current climate if you pile the resources, the people, the money, the skills, the expertise into the right places. So finally then, what we'd love you to do, if you're excited and enthused about winning more MPs too, first of all, don't just go crazy and throw out of the window all of your amazing work to win more councillors. Winning more councillors is the bedrock of winning MPs, so keep focused on doing that. But if you're involved in a local party, get on with selecting brilliant candidates for the general election across the country, and ideally by early autumn. And for some of those really keen candidates who are really on the, intending to become MPs in the future, we're going to have a whole training package to get them ready to apply for that. I'm not going to say a lot about this, but don't do deals locally with other parties. There's lots of discussion, I think, in the chat about kind of progressive alliances or whatever else. If there are any deals or conversations to be done, they need to be done at the national level. The priority is to get candidates for the Greens selected everywhere, and then let's have the conversation if the other parties are willing to have it. If you're not in a priority constituency, keep that general election campaign focused to deliver your local election wins, and spend your time, as I said, going and helping in priority constituencies. At least a couple of times this year would be absolutely amazing. And I will share in the chat in a second this link that allows you to let us know that you're really up for and excited about helping out with winning MPs and where you can go. And I'll also share this link because a little bit later in June in Bristol, there is going to be an absolutely massive action weekend to really kickstart Carla's run to success at the general election. So I'll be sharing those links and I'm just really excited for what we're going to achieve.
Amazing. Thank you, Paul. And yeah, I think, reflecting on the campaign we've just run, the benefits of getting early help cannot be overestimated. If you're going to, we're talking about these constituencies, we're talking about it being a while off. Don't plan to help them in 2024. Help them now, because that's way more valuable. Help early, help often. I think that is my new slogan. But yeah, sign up, do that, please, because you've no idea the difference it makes, especially when you're building up a campaign team to feel that support from outside. So now, without further ado, I am here to introduce our next MP. And this strategy is designed to put Carla Denyer into Parliament. And she's absolutely fantastic and will be the best MP since Caroline Lucas, if not better. Let's find out. But yeah, I'm going to introduce you, Carla. This strategy is... It's designed to help you and others get into Parliament. It's not just for Bristol. But do you feel confident that this is now the way we're going to do this, that we're going to put more people into Parliament through under first past the post using our
Yes, absolutely. And the path to it is really, I think, has been laid out really clearly. First, I just want to say a quick congratulations to the 124 Green councillors who were elected or re-elected last week. I think quite a lot of them are on the call, so well done. And what I'm just very quickly on the local elections, what I'm particularly excited about is the fact that we've broken onto 23 new councils that previously had no Green representation, because we talk a lot about the impact of having just 1 or 2 Greens in the room and the impact that has on decision making. Well, now 23 fusty old council chambers are about to have the windows thrown wide open by newly elected Greens. I'm very excited about that. In Bristol, we are also excited. We didn't have any local elections, but we had a referendum on whether to keep the mayoral system the city has had for the last 10 years, which is a really intense concentration of power in the hands of one person, or whether to switch to a more open and collaborative committee system, which facilitates cross-party working. Now, we as Greens, nationally and locally, backed the committee system, and against pundits' expectations, I think, and thanks in large part to the hard work of local Greens, the committee system won with a convincing 59% of the vote. Now, that is good news for transparency and democracy generally, but it's also particularly good news for the Greens, because in Bristol, we have actually the largest group of Green councillors anywhere in the UK, and we're also the joint largest political group on Bristol City Council. We're level pegging with Labour on 24 apiece, and the other group's much smaller. So if Bristol had been a committee system already a year ago when we had the local elections, then that means probably we would be in a joint Green Lab administration now. But this referendum result, which will take effect in 2024 when we have our next local elections, means that we will go into that election as the joint largest party. And of course, we're aiming to grow. So that means in Bristol, we're working towards our twin goals of taking control of the council and getting Bristol's first Green MP, yours truly. We have already got started. We're working really hard. Responses on the doorstep are really positive so far. People are open-minded about voting Green, but we know that Labour will roll out that keep the Tories out squeeze message claptrap nearer the election. And in Bristol, by the way, it really is claptrap. The Tories don't have a single councillor in Bristol West. They cannot win there, but Labour still try and claim it. So as John said, your help as early as possible is really, really valuable, because we want to knock on as many doors as we can, as early as we can, to inoculate voters to that spin from Labour before they hear it from Labour, so that when they hear it from them, they know it's rubbish because they've already had it explained to them why it's rubbish by us. Now, in 2019, a lot of you will know that we came second place in Bristol West with over 18,000 votes, which is the highest number of votes the Green Party has ever received in a general election anywhere except Brighton Pavilion. So that's a good start. Why do I think that we can close that gap and win it next time? Well, firstly, it's a very swingy constituency. Labour like to rewrite history and make it out to be a safe Labour seat, but in fact it was Lib Dem until 2015, and it has lots of those broadly left anti-establishment but very Remain voters that Carl was talking about earlier. It also has a big chunk of left-wing young voters in Bristol West who loved Corbyn, but actually the Labour MP there is very centrist. So in 2019, they kind of held their nose and voted for her because Corbyn. And we suspect that they will not necessarily be willing to hold their nose when they don't like either the local Labour MP or the leader of the Labour Party. And they won't come to us automatically, but with a bit of persuasion they can. And anecdotally, we've already had a few contacting us and saying, I used to door knock for Labour, now I'm all yours, what do you want me to do? Which is great. We've also, of course, another change since 2019 is we've had enormous success in the local elections. So in 2021, we went up from 11 to 24 councillors in Bristol. That's across Bristol as a whole. And in the Bristol West constituency, we now have 16 out of the 20 councillors, and we came close in the other seats as well. 3 are Labour and 1 is Lib Dem, and as I mentioned, no Conservatives. So that really changes the landscape. And in fact, if you look at the votes cast, we got twice as many votes as Labour did in Bristol West in the local elections. Another reason that I think that the tectonic plates are shifting is that my profile has, of course, increased massively. In 2019, I was selected and announced as the candidate in September. and the election was in December. So we tried our best, but we only had a few months to get my name and face known, and we couldn't get around every door and get in the front cover of every newspaper in that time. This time, I'm co-leader of the party. I will have been for several years, probably by the time the general election rolls around. I'm on the national media every couple of days at the moment, plus local media, and that will stay steady, if not increase. I mean, it will increase in the run up to the general election. And that national profile, I mean, it helps anywhere, but it's particularly important in places like Bristol, which has 2 big universities. So there's lots of students and recent graduates there who move around a lot every year or two. And so they're much less likely to be interested in hyper-local issues like what the local MP has done about the doctor's surgery, and much more likely to be interested in national politics. So having a national figure will appeal to those people. Final reason why I'm feeling optimistic is the boundary review that was mentioned earlier. So if the general election happens autumn 2023 or later, which is what it currently looks like is going to happen, then if you looked at just the effects of the boundary review alone, which removed 3, because Bristol West is much, much bigger than it should be, so it'll shrink as a result of this boundary review, and the 2 of the 3 wards that are going to be moved over into a neighbouring constituency are very Labour. So that carves off half of the Labour majority from 2019 in one fell swoop. So that's, even if I wasn't co-leader of the Green Party, even if we weren't going to run a much better campaign this time, it would halve the majority in one swoop. So that makes it really, really winnable for us. None of these things mean that we'll win it automatically. So I'm not sitting back, you know, cockily counting on it, but it means that we've got that political wind that was mentioned earlier, and now we've got to row hard in the same direction, and then I think we can get it.
A strong and persistent metaphor throughout this entire thing. Thank you, Carla. I think, you know, I completely agree with you, your and Paul's optimism here. It just looks like we have the best chance we've ever had with this, and everything's happening right. But yeah, we can't sit back, and the rest of the party can't sit back and leave it to you just to achieve on your own. And we can't, we have to start now, because you can't just, like, we've had these 2 snap elections that have been really, really tough, and we've really, really faced the squeeze in both of them, and dealing with that is going to be such hard work. Inoculating the entire area against that is going to be such hard work, and it starts now. So yeah, fantastic stuff. Now I need to wrap up and thank everybody, but I just wanted to ask if any of the other panelists have any anything further to add to what we've just heard from Paul and Carla, or any questions for them. If not, I have a question for Carla.
Quickest thing ever, Sean. I was talking to Paul yesterday. Such discipline within local parties in the Green Party now. Where, you know, I don't actually use the term target to win, but parties do, because there isn't actually a very clear definition of it. But you know, activists go and campaign in 1 or more target wards where we can build the votes to win in the first past the post system. And to win general election seats, target to win looks like travelling to constituencies. It's more than just a short bus ride. But that's what will win ultimately, and that's what the Lib Dems do to win their by-elections and others. That's what target to win looks like nationally.
Excellent. We have lots of lovely members in Bristol who have lots of lovely spare rooms and can cook up enormous batches of curry for everyone.
So the final question I have, it comes from some of the things that people have been asking in the chat as well. And if people can't travel, and this is not a soft option, we want you to travel and knock on doors, especially if you've got experience. Are there going to be ways in which you can help remotely, given the importance of technology and social media? You don't have to tell me what those are now, but I'm hoping there's going to be also a backup way of supporting people so that everyone can be involved in this. I think the whole party needs to be involved.
I mean, the brief answer is yes. We've still got some more to do to give to kind of sort the details out, but yes, there absolutely will be things you can do from where you are that don't involve you traveling.
Superb. Thank you very much. And then the top voted question that is left in the chat is one for you, Carla, I think, which is, why do you think that so many more women than men vote Green? Is it strong and visible female leadership, or do you think that there's something about our policies that are just fundamentally going to push people that way? And is that a problem for us?
Do you know, I don't actually know. Yeah, I mean, you could make various sweeping statements about what women are typically like, but I don't know how much I buy into those.
No.
So yeah, and I'm not the pollster here, so I'm not going to make an uneducated guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If Carl knows, I'd love to hear.
I'd be inclined to go with just identification. That first thing they said, essentially. What do you think, Carl?
I mean, I think that the issues that the Green Party are associated with are traditionally more favourable to women. So certainly the environment. I think there has been a long period where strong women leaders are seen from the Green Party, talking in kind of not a particularly macho way. I mean, I think it is. I think it's that. I think that I think there has been a very long time ago, more women used to vote Conservative, say 20, 30 years ago. That's shifted and women have become more left wing, if you like. Women were very supportive, more than men, of Jeremy Corbyn. I think there is something about, if I really wanted to make a serious point about this, I think the centre of gravity in politics has changed since the financial crash in 2007, and since then, and probably a little bit before, incomes have fallen. They're not aligned with the cost of living and wages anymore, and I think it is women who pick up the pieces more than men and have those responsibilities that probably make them focus more on social and economic issues which tilt towards the left.
Yeah, that's
my answer.
That's a great point. Right, we're a bit over time, but I want to wrap up with.
John, can I just one bit of information?
Final, sorry, go on. Yes, go. I was going to.
Just in answer to the question about helping remotely, link that someone shared earlier, and I've just put in the chat again, to sign up to help in the constituencies. I think that mailing list will be used to tell you about opportunities to help remotely. So do sign yourself up to that anyway, and then you'll get to hear about them as soon as we figured out what they are.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we need to thank everybody who's been here, but also particularly give thanks to the field team and the leadership team, who I know have been out just like supporting every single one of these different campaigns. And I know that you'll probably also want to, there's a couple of people who've raised the fact that a lot of people came close and didn't quite win, and this is part of the process, I'm afraid. It took me 12 years between first trying to get elected and actually getting elected as a councillor before we had such an extensive and brilliant field team. It is something that it is part of the process, and you learn and you pick yourself up and you move on. And I think even places like Bristol and Norwich have had setbacks in the past, and they've come back even better. So you're not doing anything wrong. You can be unlucky. Do press on. And it is, we spend a lot of time thinking about the successes, but the people who are going to succeed next needed a little mention today. So I hope that's okay. But also just yay, because this is all, on aggregate, this is clearly working so well. And I think it's just absolutely brilliant. So yeah, final word to Carla, by the way, that's what I was going to say before.
Oh no, that's fine. I've had my piece. But yeah, I second that. To everyone that didn't quite get in this time, I'm sorry. I know that it probably stings a bit, especially when the party on average has done so well. But don't lose hope. A lot of you came very close, and we will get you in soon.
You've got a bar chart for next time, at least. So thank you. I'm going to close the webinar now. I don't really know how to do that. I'm not the technical person in charge, but I'll just keep saying thank you to our fantastic guests. Thank you to Carl, Paul, Zoe, Chris, and Carla. And thank you to everyone who stayed a bit late on the support team as well. Sorry for running over. Thank you, everybody. And at some point, please kill the feed. Bye then. Thanks. Bye.